Monday, June 8, 2020, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, protests all across the world for George Floyd. An end to police brutality. We'll show you what took place in the United States and across the world. Also, Mayor Muriel Bowser of D.C., she has painted this particular street leading to the White House, Black Lives Matter. We'll show you the reaction from folks. Not only that, we're going to talk about, of course, the Congressional Black Caucus and Democrats unveiling today a major police reform bill. Also, what does defund the police mean? What does it look like? We'll break it down with our experts. And also, Dr. Cecilia Rouse is one of Obama's economic advisors. She'll explain why Donald Trump cannot take credit for this economy. Speaking of the economy, we are now officially in a recession. Folks, it's been a jam-packed show. It's time to bring the funk. Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
we also now have to put a face on this other deaths. That's why I believe we've got to get cameras in places in hospitals when people are dying. You know, what we're trying to do with the Poor People's Campaign is getting people on camera who are dying from poverty, who we've got to show America this is not just about numbers, damn it. This is about human beings. I think we almost have to do, I'm going to talk about it at a national sermon at the National Cathedral this weekend, is that we have to do what's called a death measurement now on every piece of public policy. How much death does this cause? You know, that's what we have to do and show it to people. But his death, the way he died, we died with him, but we also were resurrected. When his spirit was released, it came into us all over. Look at all the people around this country. Some of them don't even know all the reasons why they're out there, even around the world, but they know something's wrong. Something's terribly wrong. And that's why I'm saying the political leaders, don't just try to hurry up and put this back in the box. Don't just hurry up and try to make people stop mourning. Don't just talk about what McConnell will allow. McConnell has no control over this now. Trump has no control over this now. What you need to do is put before them what ought to be and let them in the face of all of this vote it down and see what happens at the polls and see what happens throughout America and the world. This is a watershed moment. This is a watershed moment. And you know what I like, Roland, when Emmett Till was killed and his killers were acquitted in the state courts, Rosa Parks said, all right, I'm going after the whole system. Her response to his death was not just to say we need to keep fighting against his killers. Her response was, we're going to go after the whole system. That's what Rosa Parks did, and that's what we have to do.
Reverend Dr. William Barber, we certainly appreciate it, sir. Thank you so very much.
Take care, my friend.
All right. Again, folks, to that point, Maj, that's when you talk about going after the system. I think what you are seeing when you look at these Confederate statues being torn down, when you look at folks being fired, when you look at the Variety editor-in-chief writing a column on diversity, and then she gets smacked by a former staffer, and then they have her step down. Then you got folks getting fired. You got 7 Republican county chairs who've been sharing these George Floyd conspiracy memes, and then now you got the governor of the state and the lieutenant governor, both Republicans, telling them y'all need to step down, not take office. There is a reckoning that is taking place, and this is where we should not be ratcheting it down, but I say ratcheting it up.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But what I would, again, encourage everyone to do, I think we had these conversations and we, you know, they're going to pull back with the police. We're going to defund and all of those different things. We need to be armed. We need to be educated. We need to be in shape. We need to be in position. I think that, you know, again, it's the Sankofa conversation. We kind of got to look backwards a little bit to move forward. When I think about these types of things, Harriet Tubman wasn't someone that was, you know, trying to get things done just with good intentions. I think that our community, because we've seen so much ignorance and negligence around firearms, we also forget that these firearms and proper, safe, responsible ownership of them is what has helped us. When you're talking about Dr. King, you're talking about SNCC, you're talking about, you know, Dr. King had his nonviolent arm of it, but there were a lot of, you know, guys that came home from different types of military understanding that, you know, we have to be armed to protect ourselves. The reality is America was built on money and violence. America was built on the back of black people. That's just the reality of it. When we want these things to stop, you have to either attack their money violently or you have to be willing to defend yourself. That is the primary goal here. Legislation is great. Legislation is great, but we're talking about officers. I mean, hate crimes, murder, that's been unlawful for however long now. They've been lynching people for however long.
But here's the piece, though. How does us arming ourselves change education? How does us arming ourselves deal with health disparities? How does arming ourselves deal with wealth inequality? This whole issue we're talking about goes beyond arming ourselves.
Well, absolutely it does. We can deal with this is a holistic approach. Just like there's a solid group of good things in this legislation.
Right. So I ask you, how does arming ourselves lead to police reform?
So the same reason how police reform happened when people were getting brutalized when the Black Panthers stood up. The same way that we are in spaces right now, we got to look at the stats. In areas where there is more gun control, more less educated Black people that are armed, violent crimes are up, which seemingly justifies law enforcement officers coming into our community, controlling and patrolling. So what you can't, listen, at a certain point, now this is just one angle of it. This is just one angle. At the same time, when we're talking about the firearms being there, I want brothers to be armed and responsible and lawful. So when they are accosted or attempting to be accosted by law enforcement officers that are corrupt, one, they're not going to jail because they got a dirty gun on them. That's one angle. That's my angle at Black Guns Matter. When we're talking about legislation around arming Black people, when we do these classes for free all across the country, we're talking about safe and responsible ownership. We also add in conflict resolution and political education.
But again, though, I'm still stuck on. I get you supporting arming us, but what is still confusing is how does arming ourselves actually lead to systemic changes in police departments? How?
You do not utilize people, just like those racists in Fishtown that were protecting their neighborhoods because they were armed with bats. I am not a person that's going to continue allowing police to brutalize us.
Okay, so that means, so you're saying that what? If you see a police officer committing police brutality, then folks should be firing on those cops?
I think that one step is, for me, for example, Roland, if I see somebody attacking you, police officers, I'm going to jump in that fray. Everything doesn't mean go right to a firearm, because there's a difference there between being armed and being a firearm. I want Black people to have enough pride for themselves to be willing to step in when we see somebody after minute 1, minute 2. I went to Minneapolis. I was there and I did a firearm safety class right at where George Floyd was murdered last week in Minneapolis. I would have loved for someone, knowing that officer was killing a Black man, for instead of 20 people to record it, I would have loved for one Black man to jump in and potentially save his life.
Okay, so if one Black man jumps in to save his life, and then the cops then have probable cause to fire on him for obstructing the police, and so now we're dealing with.
Do you want to stand up and fight against these things?
No. Actually, no. What I actually want is I don't want more Black people dying.
I'm tired of the argument that we cannot fight back. I am tired of that
argument. You can go buy as many guns as you want to. There were 4 officers on the scene. Hold on.
I'm not talking about guns at this moment.
No, wait a minute. There were 4 officers on. Hold on. There were 4 officers on the scene.
I'm talking about in one scenario, because you're asking me 4 different questions at a time.
No, actually, I'm not. I asked one.
If I see you, my brother, if I see any police officers or any of these beautiful people in this panel right here, if I see officers, we as Black people have the right. It doesn't have to necessarily be a firearm. We have the right to. I'll gladly catch that case to save any of these sisters' lives or your life, my brother.
Actually,
I think Black
we don't have.
Actually, do that on the scene as well.
Actually, based upon the law,
is a part of it.
Actually, based upon the law, we don't.
Is a part of it. Education reform is a part of it. Civics is a part of it. Being responsible is a part of it.
But you actually,
our lives don't matter.
You don't have the right, because the law is in their hands. If you obstruct,
that's not true. The Supreme Court precedent said that if you see officers initiating an unlawful arrest, you are well within your rights to stop that officer up into death. And we got proof for that. Tupac shot 2 off-duty police officers.
But wait a minute.
Did he go to jail and he saved his life?
But wait a minute. When you talk about determining what is an unlawful act, it's no different than when the officer told Sandra Bland, get out of the car. The moment, and see, first of all, you're talking about the moment he gave her that directive, according to Texas law, it did not matter if she thought why he stopped her was not proper. The moment he gives a directive, Texas law says you are to obey the directive. It doesn't matter if you think it's unlawful. That's why he did it.
Let me tell you something, Roland. Let me share something with you. You're talking about law, and I'm talking about saving Black people's lives.
Okay, what I'm talking about, no, you can't say you have the right if you do that, not talking about law.
On the goalpost a little bit in this
Okay,
conversation.
actually, no, actually, I'm not. What I'm trying to explain to you is,
this is my brother.
No, hold up, bro, follow me here. I'm born and raised in Texas. I saw the entire video. The moment that state trooper told Sandra Bland to get out of the car, she was compelled to follow his directive. She said, why? She did nothing wrong. It did not matter if she did nothing wrong. At that very moment, she was actually, the moment she said no, she was actually breaking the law. That's actually law.
You know who else said no? You know what other women said no? Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Ida B. Wells. This notion, slavery was
Bruh, hold up. Okay, hold on. Stop. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna pick this back up.
Bro.
Hold on. No. Hold on. Okay. You can't say. Hold on 1 second.
If I was there,
1
I
second.
want to catch that case
1 second.
and save George
1 second.
Floyd's life.
You
That's
can't
what I
say. You
wanna
can't
do.
say on
That's
one
how I wanna
hand.
share that
Now,
with black people.
follow me here. You can't say on one hand we have the right to do something if the law says you don't. But I got to do this here. Now, I'm trying to tell. Okay. All right. Hold on 1 second. Here's the whole, folks.
Okay.
The economy is a critical issue. And that is, of course, you got Donald Trump out there trying to claim credit for this whole economy. We're now officially into a recession. Well, one of the folks who actually can talk about this with real perspective is a woman who was one of the Obama White House Council of Economic Advisors. She right now is the, of course, she's now the dean. Okay, guys, let me know when she comes back on. So we're supposed to have Cecilia Rouse on, Dean Cecilia Rouse of the Woodrow Wilson School. So let me know when she is back on the line, please, because I want to talk about the economy. Because this is also a part of this whole deal. The economy and police reform is all going to be a part of this election that's coming up. You're already seeing it right now. We already have the report where that they sort of fudged the numbers, where really the unemployment rate wasn't 13.3%, was really more 16%. You're seeing all these different things, and so we need somebody who can actually explain it to us. And so in a moment, we're going to have Dean Cecilia Rouse, who's on. Dean Rouse, how you doing?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
All right, so it had to crack you up laughing to see a tweet when Donald Trump said that he built this economy when we had 75 months of consecutive growth, and he hasn't been president 75 months.
No, he has not. So the National Bureau of Economic Research just came out today. They look back and they dated the recession. So they dated the start of our new recession as being February of 2020, which means that we had about 128 months of consecutive growth, which means that growth started in the summer of 2009, which was when President Obama was president.
And so you have to laugh at, again, somebody who thinks that they came into office on third base and then they want to crow about hitting a triple.
Well, you know, that is this president. So we were in the longest expansion, I think, ever recorded. Now, the recording doesn't go back forever, but this was one of the longest expansions on record. The economy was humming along. And then what happened was not a problem in the economy per se, but we had a pandemic. And the way to deal with the health side of the pandemic was to put the economy on pause. Unfortunately, other countries, fortunately, other countries had better tracing, testing in place and better contact tracing procedures in place. We did not, which meant that we had to use the very blunt instrument of powering down the economy, if you will, asking people to stay home, which had the effect of causing a spike in the unemployment rate and bringing our economy to a halt. So that's where we were, and that's where we remain.
Right, and so again, you were with the Obama administration before going back to Princeton, and when you hear deregulation and the tax cut, that's actually what has caused this economic resurgence, or for Trump building the greatest economy in the world. We've never, ever in American history had it better. I mean, seriously, look, you're an economist. When you hear somebody say, we've never, ever had an economy like this ever in American history, do you laugh?
Yeah, well, so look, our economy was doing okay. We had an expansion. The growth rates were not shooting the lights out, but we were seeing progress. In February of 2020, unemployment was at a very low 3.5%. One of the other challenges in our economy, though, was that we had very high levels of inequality. And so we would see that in terms of income inequality, wealth inequality, so that while some were doing very well, those who were particularly wealthy were continuing to grow, we were seeing rather stagnant wages and income in the middle classes and below. And so, yes, we had on one measure, we saw that the economy was humming along. It wasn't, seriously broken in the aggregate. Not everybody was participating, but it was, it was hanging in there. It was fundamentally doing okay.
So right now, so obviously, explain people to this. Again, this White House loved to tout how the stock market is doing and how the NASDAQ and how everything is going. And that people keep pointing to that and the financial networks. Oh my God, the economy is great. That's actually not the economy.
So the stock market is not the economy. The stock market reflects the trading and buying and investing in companies. And so the stock market is going to do well when people have a lot of confidence. And so they're willing to buy into companies and paying more to buy in those companies. And it's not going to do well when they get skittish. It doesn't reflect the fundamentals, such as the unemployment rate, GDP, other measures of production and consumption, which is how we measure the real economy. So while the news tends to focus on the stock market, that does not necessarily reflect at all what is happening in the rest of the economy.
Moving forward, obviously, we see what is happening in terms of this last report. Can you explain also this so-called this discrepancy? Where they announced 13.3%, but then we were told, well, it really was 16%. Okay, what is that error?
So the problem here is that the way we measure unemployment is through a household survey. And when they go to individuals' houses, they say, were you working last week? And if you weren't working, they have a series of questions. This current population survey was designed for typical economic times. So if you said you were not at work, say for other reasons, you might have had a job, but you weren't at work for a reason that you chose typically. I wasn't at work because I was on vacation. How people in a pandemic, when their employers were working, they had a job full time, and their employer said, well, we have to stop, we have to close. We're going to ask you to stay home until we know whether we can start again or whether we get past this virus. So when you go to an individual and say, okay, did you have a job? Did they have a job? Do they know whether they have a job or not? And if they say, well, I think I had a job, well, why weren't you at your work? What do they respond? So many of them responded, I wasn't at work for another reason. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics had intended to count those people as being unemployed. But it's a household survey, and how individuals interpret that question is not clear. So if you add everybody who responded that they were not at work for other reasons to the numbers of unemployed, then the unemployment rate reaches a level of 16.3%. So this is very much the result of the fact that the survey was designed for a different kind of economic crisis than the one we're in today, which is really fueled by a pandemic.
All right, so this is June. Obviously, the economy is going to be a big part of this election. Obviously, forecasting is sort of like the weather. And the White House is like, oh my God, we're going to have an explosion of growth in the next report. And then by August and September. And are you seeing the same thing?
Well, I try not to forecast. I think it gives economists a bad name. But I would not expect us to see growth suddenly taking off for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's the pandemic that's in charge. So we took the measures we needed to take because we wanted to slow the spread of COVID-19. We do not have a vaccine. We do not even have really effective therapeutics. I think there's one that's been approved and is for people who are really, really quite ill. So as a result, the way that we are trying to bring back our economy and generate some increased economic activities, which is what we observed in May, is the beginning of more economic activity, is with more aggressive testing and contact tracing, and importantly, physical distancing. So the problem here is that when employers have to implement physical distancing, it's going to be very hard for them to maintain full employment and to expect that we're going to have full economic activity. Restaurants cannot have a full set of tables with everybody eating and a full set of, wait staff and cooks and where everybody's physically distanced. So even if restaurants, when they open, and in some places they have to do so with restrictions on the number of clients that they have, or guests that they have, probably the number of staff that are there. And all of those restrictions are going to be a headwind for our economic activity. So until we get to the other side of this pandemic, I do not expect us to be back to a humming, growth rate and really able to take off again. So we need to see a widespread vaccinations, or at a minimum, really effective therapeutics, so that the consequences of contracting COVID-19 are not nearly as serious.
All right. Dr. Cecilia Rouse, always good to see you. Certainly enjoyed our conversations with you in the Obama White House, and look forward to having you back.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, folks, got to go to a quick break. When we come back, Senator Cory Booker is going to join us. Also, we'll be talking with Cliff Albright of Black Voters Matter, discussing a new initiative that they have, and we'll pick up on the conversation with regards to black folks arming themselves. How does that actually lead to police reform? That's next. Roland Martin Unfiltered.
The men who followed this flag 150 years ago knew what it meant. Treason against their country. The death of the United States. America defeated the men who followed that flag. Those with honor surrendered and cast it aside forever. So why does it keep showing up today at events supporting Donald Trump? And why does he call the folks who carry it very fine people?
I think there's blame on both sides, but you also had people that were very fine people.
What does it say that they're all in for Trump? What does it say that he won't condemn a flag of hate, division, and losers?
Will not replace us!
For us, it says this is a time for choosing America or Trump.
A matter as the destruction of our national fabric, with all its benefits, its memories, and its hopes.
Because they think this shit is...
Would it not be wise to ascertain precisely why we do it? Will you risk the commission of so fearful a mistake?
Brittany, I got to say, Brittany, those folks in the Lincoln Project, those group of Republicans who hate Trump, they know how to make ads.
They definitely do. And I like that ad, too. I thought that was really important, especially in this moment when we've seen so many Confederate statues, imperialist statues come down in the United States and abroad. I think it's an important moment, and I'm glad that we're seeing it happening, and I love that commercial.
Avis.
I agree. I mean, here's the thing. Republicans understand how to message. I really believe, I really hope that the Democrats start taking some notes, because we have real problems in that area. So this is why I believe that they do such a great job of putting together their ads, because they understand how to message. They don't pull punches. They make things plain. You don't need to pick up a dictionary to figure out what the hell they're saying. This is how you make people listen and move people to act. Clear messaging. That's a masterclass in what it looks like.
Marsh?
I think it's more the same. I think, like the sister Ava said, they know how to message, but clearly they don't know how to message when it comes to urban America. They clearly haven't, reached out, or they don't want to. So, I mean, this is just more the same. I'm not like moved by it. I think that the base, they throwing meat to their base. They doing it in a cool, edgy way, and that's just what they do. They know how to meme. So. Cool.
well, again, if I got no problem with a group who doesn't like Trump, if they are talking to some white folks who do, that's fine. Because frankly, I know how to talk to black people. But again, I think this is all hands on deck when we deal with this crazy nut. I want to go back to our conversation, because we're talking about, again, will we achieve form? You're making the point about why we must arm ourselves. I'm going to bring Avis and Brittany into this, and I'm looking at this, and I'm still trying to arrive at how do you achieve that if you're arming yourself when what you're talking about has nothing to do with arming yourself? Brittany, what are your thoughts on all this?
Oh, well, okay. So in terms of arming, like, let me say this. I don't think, we discuss the history of the Black community using firearms and using arms to protect ourselves. I specifically think of the messaging around Martin Luther King and how folks are like, oh, he was nonviolent in his efforts, but a lot of folks don't realize that he was also supported by the Deacons of Defense. So I will give that to the folks who are pro-firearm. At the same time, I think that we run the risk with firearms, and again, this is not my specialty, but I think we do run the risk with firearms of, if we're a person of color, we're using that firearm against the police state. I think that it in their mind, it will justify the means of violence that they will use against us, if that makes sense. So, I think it's a complex and nuanced issue, and there's just a million different directions that we can go. But it's a tough one. And again, firearms is not our only solution to this issue. We know that there's several changes that need to take place, and we have to be careful with firearms.
Well, again, the point I'm making is, I get the argument arming yourself. Charles Cobb wrote a book called "This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed." I got that. Understand it. I understand all of that. But what I'm still trying to ascertain is, what does arming yourself have to do with police reform, Avis?
Well, first thing I want to say is I want to thank the brother for saying that he would catch a case for me. I appreciate that. Okay, I appreciate that. And as someone who grew up around firearms, I think it's important that people know that the Second Amendment goes both ways. I think that's an important thing that everyone knows, and that our community also embraces. I know just when it comes to me and my house and protecting my children, I want to be able to do that. And, if anyone rolls up on my house, I want to know that I can protect myself and my family, right? Now, what makes this complex is the issue that you state, and what was so unfortunately true is that, when it comes about, when we look at what happened, for example, to MOVE in Philadelphia, there are so many examples of the state exerting tremendous amounts of violence against Black people from the very beginning of our, introduction to these shores. I understand theoretically where the brother is coming from, because to me, his argument is ultimately, it's a big picture argument. To me, his big picture argument is, hey, if people understand that there is a price to pay, perhaps behavior will change. I believe that's his big picture argument. But I also know that in the short term, and maybe and the long term, that Black people are being killed in every situation. And I think that in an attempt to defend ourselves, as we have a right to do, I agree with that.
Here's the deal. I mean, but it's still, it's the second.
When it comes to law enforcement, that they will use anytime. I mean, honestly, they will go over and above the call of duty.
Of course.
In order to meet any sort of even perceived threat. It doesn't even have to be a real threat. Any perceived threat with overwhelming force.
Here's the deal. Okay, Second Amendment is the Second Amendment. Applies to everybody. Philando Castile had a license, still got shot and killed. Yeah. I'm still trying. So again, making the argument about Black folks arming themselves is a separate argument. I'm still trying to ascertain, how do you do that to achieve police reform? That was the question. So it's a different discussion if we say, hey, let's encourage Black people to get armed. Okay, got it. You can go buy a gun. It's the Second Amendment. How does that achieve police reform?
So there's several things. One, first, I want to say thanks to, Roland. I hope I get passionate about these things when we're talking about, our people being murdered unarmed. My primary objective is to make sure that they have the means to defend themselves, to protect life. I think you initially brought up something in regards to, what's lawful, but I'm more concerned with falling in alignment with saving life. Again, we have scenarios where a lot of things have been lawful, but that doesn't mean that they were morally correct. So I kind of want to add that distinction here. In regards to how we change I can go with my lived experience. I got a firearm on me right now. I carry a firearm every single place that I go. I deal with law enforcement a lot. When going back to the Philando Castile thing, one of our classes, what we deal with in our classes is knowing the law. To your point, Minnesota is not a duty to notify state. Duty to notify means you have a duty to notify a law enforcement officer when you're pulled over if you have a firearm on you. Minnesota is not a duty to notify state. Philando Castile, and not knowing that information, and I want to be very clear on how I say this. God bless him. The work that he did working with young people, his family, they will never see him again. If I could have jumped into Philando Castile's body and tell him, hey, man, you have no legal obligation to tell this coward, officer at the time, that you have a firearm. I think that scenario goes a little bit differently. So education about being armed and knowing the laws, to your point, Roland, is how we not only save life, but we also, when those rights are being violated, when you're talking about, I spoke earlier about attacking people's money violently, we have to start suing the state. I hear so many guys at the classes say they got pulled over, they weren't speeding, but then they don't want to go to court. A big part of this is knowing the law, educating the people about their rights, that, to be perfectly honest, in our democratic cities and our urban centers all across the country, those laws are not applied equally. Let's just be real.
But I'm going back to the, first of all, everything you're saying is absolutely correct. Know the law, know the provisions, which is also why I'm making the point about when you say know the law. So, for instance, I go back to what happened to Sandra Bland. The problem that we have, which is why I'm dealing with police reform. The problem that we have is you have officers who know the law, who know what buttons to push, and then know how to get somebody. You play that video back, he knew he had pissed her off. He knew that she was agitated when she was smoking that cigarette when he told her to put it out. And the moment he gave her a lawful command and she resisted, that's when he began to pull on the door, and at that very moment, she was under arrest. Because even if I am in the car, and if I know what you're doing is BS, I know what you're saying is BS, the moment you give the order based upon that state, then I have to comply. Now, there are some places where if the officer demands for your ID, you have to show them. We showed a video out of Chicago where this cop rode up on these two brothers, and there was another brother who was videotaping. He started reciting the law because that was that particular state. I want the people who are watching to understand that you might be in New Jersey, and somebody else might be in Georgia, and somebody else might be in California, somebody else might be in North Carolina, and the law ain't the same. It's based upon your state in terms of understanding the law. And that was the whole point there. And so, again, I think it's a separate conversation about making the argument about African Americans being armed. I still believe that is a separate discussion than police reform.
Well, I think, yes, I do agree with you that those are separate discussions, because just, again, like we were talking about, all of these, even in this legislation, there's different levels and layers to it. So I think you're talking armed. When you're talking about knowing the law, that is a part of being armed. I walk around.
No. I'm talking about knowing the law. I don't even carry a gun. I better know the law in my state because I need to understand when somebody rolls up and, again, understand that. And so here's the deal. I work in D.C. I live in Virginia. I also live in my home in Texas. I might be thinking, well, Texas law is this. That don't mean a damn thing if I'm getting stopped in Richmond, Virginia. I need to also know the law in Richmond.
We're saying the same thing. What we're talking about, again, there was a reason why they didn't want us to read books like the one that you mentioned here. There's a reason why they want you to read, More Guns, Less Crime, so forth and so on, because that's still a form of arming. Now, I'm not saying that, hey.
About 20 seconds. I got to go to the next guest. Go, about 20 seconds. Go. No. Seriously, I got Senator Cory Booker holding. So make your point.
If anybody wants information on it, hit me
up. No. Taj, you're not off the show yet. I'm saying you got 20 seconds to finish that point so I can bring on the next guest.
Be armed, be informed, get a CCW act, know the laws of your municipality and state to start out with.
Hold tight 1 second, folks. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey joins us right now. Senator Booker, how you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for having me, man.
Let's just talk about the bill that was announced today by the Congressional Black Caucus and other Democrats. it posed very well by Obamacare. But even the Obama White House was using Obamacare, saying we can flip it. I'm like, no, you can't flip what was meant to be a negative. But go right ahead.
Right. Right. And so here we are now in another slogan contest. And when I want to get to the spirit and the substance behind those people who are calling in agony about the reality in America, that we have defunded public education, and we know dollars invested in education lower the need for police and prisons. In fact, every dollar you spend on education behind bars, helping people get their GEDs and the BAs and MAs in prison, save you $4 to $7 in recidivism, which means police and more prisons. We know the things to do to lower the taxpayer expenditures on police and prisons. We know the things that we could be doing, but we're not funding them. Drug treatment, job training, mental health care, support for children who are below the poverty line to get them above the poverty line. And that's the absurdity of where we are. We're about to have a false debate in America when we simply should say, what is the real things that keep communities safe? Because I remember sitting in one of my first meetings as a mayor, sitting with the FBI in Newark, New Jersey, when we were talking about gang interdiction. And I said, how do we solve this? And the head of the FBI at that point, I wrote about this in my book, looks at me and says, we don't solve these problems. Police, in other words, law enforcement, head of the FBI, we don't solve these problems. They're just dealing with the symptoms of the deeper problems. And so activists in the streets who are saying police don't solve the problem. In fact, I'm worried about the police killing me. Can't we start funding the things that even the police know actually solve the problems? We know kids who have trauma, and there are numbers of trauma. Poverty alone is an indicator of trauma, according to medical experts. Lead poisoning and toxic sites or give trauma to child bodies. We know that, and we live in a country where there's more than 3,000 jurisdictions where children have more than twice the blood lead levels of Flint, Michigan. And the number one indicator of if you're around a toxic site or not is the color of your skin. So this is an absurd argument. When I was a mayor and I had violent crime issues, I was trying to do everything I could to help my police get more guns off the streets. But my police themselves would tell me, these problems are starting because we're not doing enough for our children. We're not doing enough to deal with addiction. Across the street from me, Roland, I don't know if you've ever come. Why do you ever visit me, man? You just all talk. I don't know
what
kind of friend
about?
You are.
Where? Newark?
Yeah.
I've been in Newark.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I spoke in Newark a couple of months ago at the Symphony Hall for Mayor Roz Baraka. Where were you?
Well, damn, that's even worse.
Oh, see, come on.
You were in my city and you didn't even come visit me.
They ran posters. They put it all over the place.
You got my number, man. Because I know you used my digits.
2,000 other black people saw me there. And they cheered.
I would have been up. I would have lit a candle, man. I would have put the flashlight on my cell phone and waved it around.
All right, so hold up. So let's just do this here. Fine, let's do this here, okay? I own this show. So let's do a town hall between now and November in Newark, and we'll live stream it on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
No, Roland Martin. I want to get you out of your comfort zone.
Fine.
I want to do a walk around my neighborhood.
Dude, I got portable equipment. We can live stream that.
So I want to go to Integrity House.
Okay.
Across the street, sit with fellas who were arrested dozens of times, costing us millions of dollars before they got the drug treatment they need. Let's go sit in the barber shop. You and I both might need a little help, touch up there.
I'm good. I'm good. I got way more hair than you.
And talk to fellas about what's really happening.
Oh, but I see what I'm saying. We can go portable. We got portable. We can do all that. Okay. And we can still live stream it. So you tell me when, and we'll have my cameras there.
All right. See, because I think what I would love for your viewers to see, and most of your viewers probably know this already because they live it or they know it intrinsically, is that we waste so much money in society. Think about the drug crimes. At Stanford and Yale, I'm sorry, I saw lots of drug use. Nobody got criminal charges. people doing the same thing in communities of color where you're over-policed, then as soon as you get an 18-year-old now with a criminal conviction for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing, now that kid can't get a job, can't get a Pell Grant, can't get a business license, can't get a loan from the bank. And so this is the shame of our society, is by over-policing, over-criminalizing, over-incarcerating, we're actually creating the conditions for more violence and more challenge. And so as a mayor, I need to protect my community. The #1 polling thing when I ran for mayor in 2002, 2006, 2010 was wanting more protection. Because in many ways, Black communities have concerns about gun violence and more.
So how does that jive though with defund police? Are you saying that the problem with this whole conversation is that people are stuck on the phrase itself and really not what they're focused on? Because this is what I'm hearing. People are not saying get rid of the police departments. What they're saying is cities are spending an inordinate amount of money on policing, and they're completely ignoring the mental health problems. So when cops encounter people with mental health illness, they end up being dead because cops don't know how to deal with that. What they're saying is, to one of my guests, Maj Toure, he was like, you need conflict resolution. You need to be teaching police officers that pulling the gun is not your first, second, and third option. So when I hear defund the police, they're saying study your budget and stop just saying, oh, we're just going to throw more money at the cops, because that's essentially saying the same as build more jails, throw more people in, and that solves the problem.
And see, that is the race to the bottom, when you have people standing up saying, I'm going to put 1 million more cops on America's streets that are persecuting a drug war. I remember having a good conversation with people who study policing and saying, look, communities of color often have too much of the policing that they don't need, and not enough policing of the ones of the type they want. And ultimately what you're saying there, Roland, which is true, which is if we started to invest in the ways our communities really deeply want to see for their children, for their schools, for their job opportunities, and more, ultimately the demands in communities of color for more safety and security protections would be going down, as would those budgets from mayors who understand that their crime rates are going down for the right reasons.
All right. Senator Cory Booker, we appreciate it. Let me know when we want to do this thing, man. We'll make it happen.
All right. Don't sneak up in my neighborhood anymore without letting me know.
Yeah, okay. All right. Glad you came out, hung out my hood for a little bit.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
All right, folks. Today, Senator Kamala Harris was on The View, and Meghan McCain threw out her defund the police question without even knowing what the hell it even means. Watch this.
Activists right now are calling for a defunding of the police. The Minneapolis City Council just agreed on a bill on this. Right before I came to tape the show, there was a clip on CNN from a Minneapolis City Councilwoman who said, quote, it's a place of privilege if someone breaking into your home wants to call the police. This is gaining a lot of steam. Nancy Pelosi this morning just refused to answer if she would support defunding the police. I just want to know from you, do you support defunding and removing police from American communities? And if not, why do you think there's such a hard time being differentiated right now between defunding and reforming police departments?
So, Megan, I think that a big part of this conversation really is about reimagining how we do public safety in America, which I support, which is this. We have confused the idea that to achieve safety, you put more cops on the street, instead of understanding to achieve safe and healthy communities, you put more resources into the public education system of those communities, into affordable housing, into home ownership, into access to capital for small businesses, access to health care regardless of how much money people have. That's how you achieve safe and healthy communities. And so we really do need to understand and reimagine what and how we can actually make and help make communities safe. Because here's the bottom line. If you contrast, many communities which have a heavy presence of police to middle and upper middle class suburbs in America, you will not see that presence of police. But what you will see You will see families who have an income that allows them to get through the end of the month. You will see good public schools. You will see people who have access to health care and can afford it. You will see people who have jobs. And so this has to be the conversation, which is how are we going to be smart in achieving what should be our collective goal, which is that all communities are safe, and knowing that safe communities are usually safe because they are healthy because of a number of things, including the economy, including education, including access to health care. And that's how I think about this. You know, in many cities in America, over 1/3 of their city budget goes to police. So we have to have this conversation. What are we doing? What about the money going to social services? What about the money going to helping people with job training? What about helping with the mental health issues that communities are being plagued with, for which we're putting no resources? And here's the other thing. When I talk to law enforcement, they know that they don't want to be, nor are they skilled to be the ones who are responding to someone with mental illness or substance abuse or the homeless population. But in many cities, that's what's happening, because we are not directing those resources, those public resources, to where they need to go, which is addressing mental health, homelessness, substance abuse, so that we don't have to have a police response because we are smarter.
Senator, I hear you loud and clear, and I don't think there's any rational American right now who doesn't think that we need to take a cold, hard look at reforming our police. But there was a video that went viral over the weekend of the mayor of Minneapolis being yelled at, saying, yes or no question, are you for defunding the police? So I'm going to ask the same question the protesters asked him. Are you for defunding the police?
How are you defining defund the police?
Well, I'm not for anything remotely for that, so I would ask the protesters the same thing. But I assume I assume, and again, this is something that is new to me, I assume it's removing police, and as Congresswoman Ilhan Omar said, bringing in a whole new way of governing and law and order into a community. And my understanding, again, this is something that has just come into my understanding recently, is that you would not have police officers like this Minneapolis City Councilwoman said, that I would be a place of privilege if someone broke into my home and I wanted to call the police.
So, again, we need to reimagine how we are achieving.
Come on. Avis, your Senator Harris like, well, I got to answer this little child. First of all, you're saying, I assume. I'm just learning about this. Megan has no clue what the hell she's talking about. Kamala Harris just sat there and explained to you what defund the police is, and you have no idea. Okay, so Avis, you were tweeting about this. So is the issue the hashtag? Is it too complex? Or is the problem folks don't actually want to read? What is it?
Well, here it is. I kind of alluded to this earlier. Democrats need to be a lot more savvy when it comes to messaging. You know, we have great ideas, and I don't think anyone with 2 grains of sense would disagree with anything that Senator Harris just said there. Even Meghan McCain seemed to agree with what she was saying. The challenge is that the actual phrase that's being used to describe that can lead people to misinterpret what's being demanded here. When I hear
education system, you have to you gotta lead with empathy. And I can't be a little frustrated that I have a certain level of understanding because of the books that we read. Of course you don't know. We haven't studied the same things. So I think everybody in the panel, to your point, Roland, which is like, come on, bro, you can't be talking about something that can't even pretty much explain. At the same time, when you're to the first sister's point, you have to be able to explain this in a manner. You got to applesauce it. Babies don't have teeth. You have to be able to give it to them in applesauce chunks. If these are the people that you're trying to explain, because like Brittany said, there's different packaging. It's no different than the riots. There are people that are there that are actively trying to peaceably protest, that see something that's wrong. They're trying to solve the problem with civil disobedience or unrest, whatever you want to call it. Then there's instigators, and then there's the guys that just want LeBron James sneakers, that just want to wait later. But the general public, when it's shown on television, they may have, unless it's explained and broken down, right? They may have that one view of a thing one way, and it can be incomplete. When a lot of these issues, I think we try to make them very simple, but again, it's a holistic process. In certain areas, we do need more reform. There's certain areas where they have not handled people the same way. There's other areas where 70% of that needs to get trashed. You can look at an Ahmaud Arbery situation. That whole DA, that whole situation is horrible. But you may not have the same scenario there. I think that's an example of how we can explain that to people at different levels. And I think how Senator Harris asked her, well, what is your definition of defunding? So I can see where I'm actually meeting you at. Even though I did just explain this to you very thoroughly, I can kind of meet you somewhere in the middle.
I'm only making this point, and it's very simple. The people who are advocating for defund the police must control the narrative. What they can't do is allow the opposition to now define their own phrase and define their narrative. And that's why, for those protesters, for the people who are organized behind this, there has to be a marketing campaign, a PR campaign that is clear, that is consistent. The phrase alone doesn't do it. That's the point I'm making. So when Megan asked the question, she didn't know jack about it. And so she was just asking the question solely based on the phrase. And what I'm saying is it requires an education process. Hopefully those behind it will do that and make this happen, hopefully.
I agree. Just real quick, that's where Kaepernick failed. He did a perfect explanation of why he was taking a knee, of who he conferred with, a military man. That man told him it wouldn't be disrespectful because he was bringing attention to a thing. Right. That first interview, he explained it thoroughly. There's no way to mess it up. Then he disappeared. Then media hijacked the message. And so in that sense, absolutely.
Well, but also, his deal was he explained it, and he's not. Look, Colin's a very shy guy as well. That goes to it, and so it's all a part of that. I'm just saying, for the people out there who believe in the defunding the police and the concept, what I'm saying is control the narrative. Do not let the negative folks start telling you what it actually means, because that's where it's going to be a problem. And I can see it happening, but it hasn't taken foot yet. But we'll see what goes down. Folks, the Black Voters Matter Fund has announced the We Got the Power campaign, which is a series of power-building initiatives and events to provide black voters with tools and support to address the issues and challenges we face in our communities as we head toward the November election and beyond. Joining us right now is Cliff Albright, co-founder of Black Voters Matter. Cliff, explain this initiative.
Yeah, so basically it's a continuation in some sorts. It's a continuation of doing what we've always done, which is holding events, having conversations, tough conversations like the one y'all just had, which, by the way, I would love to get into the defund the police conversation. But having these conversations, doing a virtual bus tour, doing virtual town halls, about the blackest bus in America, Roland. Well, we've been sidelined because of coronavirus, but we're bringing it back in a virtual sense, including an animated bus. And so we're having these events, we're having these conversations. We're bringing in partners from local communities, community groups that are doing this work, including criminal justice reform work and gentrification work and coronavirus, mutual aid work. And so we're just having these conversations, and just the overall message is we got power, right? Because in the times that we're in, it's easy for us to feel powerless, right? It's easy for us to get frustrated. We got people dying from this virus. We got, people frustrated in the streets over, all these deaths that are still ongoing, by the way. And so, we just wanted to remind people that we have power. We got power. And that's what you're really seeing in the streets. And that's why you're seeing some of these cities already starting to give way on some of these demands that people are making.
And so what is this going to look like? And so what will these various these meetings be? In person or digital?
Largely digital, because we're trying to, we've been consistently trying to spread the word that coronavirus is serious, that it is not on the decline. We don't care. Don't let these governors kill you. Here, right here in Georgia, where we're based, we're seeing some of the highest number of cases since it started. Florida has just seen like 5 straight days of more than 1,000 cases per day, and so we're trying to really continue the message of getting folks to see, we need to continue to stay at home as much as possible. So we're talking mainly about a virtual strategy. We're talking about virtual events, virtual town halls. We're talking about webinars. We're talking about virtual training sessions that we're going to be doing with folks to teach some organizing skills. So a lot of it's going to be virtual information, partners talking, sharing policy, right? So that we can do some teach-ins on what some of these policies look like